Hello and welcome to another episode of Subculture. I'm Dave G, and joining me today is my co-host,
John Steed.
And today we're going to be taking a look at so many different things that's been flying around the geeky universe over the past few days. We're going to start off by taking a look at the special little video that got released yesterday, which introduces us to the villain in the new Bond film being played by Rami Malek. And so, mate, I got to start off by asking, what do you think about this character, and what do you think about Rami Malek playing the character?
Well, I mean, I haven't really seen enough, in my opinion, to make a judgment on the character. So I just saw that little sort of teaser thing. But I do really like Rami Malek. So if there's anything to be brought out of this character, I think he can do it. So I would probably watch it just for him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit about what the character does rather than who's playing the character. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but my fault with the past Bond villains hasn't been so much of who's been playing the part, it's been what they do with the role kind of thing, because the past couple of Bond villains, I've never really felt like Bond is in danger. And I was having this discussion with a friend yesterday and saying that the first season of Jack Ryan was actually a lot more suspenseful to me than what the Bond films were, because in the first season of Jack Ryan, the villain was basically a Muslim extremist doing simple things like a bomb in Paris, a plan to use a nerve agent in an American city. So even though it wasn't the huge, epic, big scale of what you would expect a Bond film to be, the villain was actually a lot more believable because the things he was doing are the things that we see in today's society. So for me, it wasn't so much who they got to play the Bond villain, it was what that character does. And I guess
it's kind of the Bond thing, though, isn't it? It's like they've always made it so, like, oh, nothing phases him, he just, walks through fire.
Yeah.
It's just sort of, it's been a bit ridiculous. The first time that a Bond movie really caught my attention with the fact of the character actually being in jeopardy was Die Another Day. Because that starts with him being captured and tortured for months on end. And I'm like, that's what we need to see. This is the first time you see, Bond is actually in trouble.
Yeah, yep.
How could he actually get out of this? And that's the sort of thing we need to see more of. I know they kind of, up the action and spectacle a little bit with the Daniel Craig ones. But, yeah, you're right. It doesn't really feel like, oh, he's not going to get out of this one.
Yeah, it's like
they do that a lot, and the villains as well have been always a bit. They either make them a bit colourful or a bit of a type.
Yeah,
and yeah, this is where I'm hoping they kind of they're casting it in order to get more character out and see why he's doing what he's doing and make a bit more meal of it.
It was like with Spooks, the television series about MI5. They established very, very early on in that series that their spies were going to get hurt and sometimes die. I think it was the pilot episode where two of them are held captive by IRA terrorists, and one of them gets tortured by having her hands and face put in the deep fry in a fish and chip shop, which I think she died from. I don't think it was just a torture scene. I think she died from it. And that kind of gave you the feeling all the while through Spooks that your favourite characters were actually in danger. Without spoiling it for anybody that hasn't watched it, another one of the characters' family gets killed, completely blown up by a terrorist who finds out where that spy lives. And it's like, that kind of thing actually made the series more interesting to watch, because you did kind of tune in and say, oh, well, they've been kidnapped, they may not come out of that kind of thing. And I know
we need to see our heroes are kind of fallible and they're not invulnerable type thing. And I guess, like, Torchwood did that, the Doctor Who spin-off.
Yeah.
In the second season, they killed off half the cast. It was like, oh, okay.
And I guess like it was almost brought home to us a little bit more this week too by the death of Rebecca Rigg, because of course her character in Bond was the first or the only character to ever marry Bond, and she was executed, which I thought again showed that while Bond might be able to protect himself, he can't always protect the ones that are around him that he loves and cares for, which I thought was a...
Yeah, I thought that movie was interesting for that fact. Like, okay, he's falling in love, he's marrying Diana Rigg's character. What was her name? Tracy or something?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, just the fact... And look, I love Diana Rigg because I'm an Avengers fan, so that was, like, huge for me. But then I just remember that scene, they're driving along, and then I think it was like a sniper shoots her in the car, and I was just like, oh shit, he's not going to have a happily ever after, is he? And yeah, that kind of made it a bit more vulnerability to the character, saying like, you know, he might look like he can get out of anything, but the people around him, not so much, and that's maybe his weak spot now.
Yeah, and that movie is really interesting to go back and watch now as well, because when you actually go behind the scenes a little bit with that movie, and I had the privilege earlier this year of actually being able to sit down and listen to George Lazenby talk about making the movie. Him and Diana Rigg didn't actually get on. They never liked each other. She didn't like him. He didn't like her, so it was really interesting that the way they that the on-screen chemistry was there, even though the two of them really despised each other. I also thought Telly Savalas, talking of Bond villains, Telly Savalas was good in that film as well. And yeah, I really think that that's something that they need to touch on. With Bond a little bit more, is make him vulnerable, and apparently that is something that's touched on in this film, so I'm hoping that's the case, because like you said, I'm sure Rami Malek is going to do a good job in the character. It just depends on how they bring that character to screen, and what exactly is the character doing. I know they said in the little trailer thing that they released yesterday that he's willing to go all the way. He sees himself a lot like Bond in that he's ridding the world of people that don't deserve to be there, kind of thing. But again, that doesn't say that he's willing to kill Bond. Like, is he going to try and recruit Bond? Is he going to try and kill him? I guess we have to wait and see, really.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is where the interest in the story lies, hopefully.
Yeah. And of course, we just mentioned the death of Diana Rigg. What's been some of the memorable roles for you with her over the years that you've loved her in?
Well, the thing is, like, I think anything she does, like, turns to gold, basically. Of course, I loved the Avengers for years. So, as Mrs. Peel, you know, pretty unstoppable. Then when was it? I think maybe the 90s. She had kind of a detective series called The Mrs. Bradley Mysteries, and she was the title character. She was kind of like a widowed socialite who kind of had a thing with her driver and was going around solving these mysteries wherever she went. So I thought that was a really good character. Of course, she's been in Game of Thrones, and she appeared in Doctor Who about 3 or 4 years ago or something like that.
Yep. Mrs. Gillyflower.
That was the one.
Yeah.
It was funny, the first time, like, I knew she was going to appear in the series with her daughter in that episode. But when it came, I totally didn't recognize her. And I went back and I'm like, oh my god, that's the episode.
Yeah.
I've never seen her look, like, so old. Like, even in Game of Thrones, I recognized her, even though she was playing an older character, I suppose, because I'd seen the Doctor Who one first, so I knew what to look for. But, normally, I'd never seen her styled like such an old granny.
Yeah.
Yes. Even at the end, I don't think she really looked like a grandma sort of thing.
Yeah. She played herself in an episode of Extras, which I absolutely loved as well. That's just one of those shows that I can go back and watch over and over. I guess for me, yeah, the role that I grew up watching her in the Avengers, but the role that I absolutely loved her in was Olenna in Game of Thrones. Such an amazing character. She was kind of one of the first characters to really stand up to what she saw was going wrong and not sucking up to the Lannisters.
Right, yeah.
And I love that about her character. It's kind of surprising to realize she was actually only in 18 episodes, because it felt like she was in a huge chunk of like the first half of Game of Thrones. But yeah,
well, the thing with Game of Thrones is that anytime a character is good and smart, they're not going to last.
Yeah. I just loved some of those scenes that she had with the various Lannisters where she let it be known in no uncertain terms that she knew what they were doing and that she wasn't going to stand for it, kind of thing. And yeah, even when she had to basically hand her granddaughter over, she still kind of let them know exactly how she felt about it, and that she was always going to be a thorn in their side, kind of thing, which I guess in a way led to her demise. But also at the same time, I thought it really showed for a strong character, because I think everybody was kind of waiting in Game of Thrones for a male character to do that, and I think the fact that they let an actress who at the time was in her 70s kind of be that character that stood up to them like that, I thought that was really well done, and I don't think it got as much credit at the time as what it actually it should have been paid, because it was such a brave decision and such a surprising decision. And I've heard...
Yeah, I agree. I think they kind of focus too much on the weirdness and spectacle and all the more gruesome elements, I suppose, of Game of Thrones, and not looking at the real, the solid stuff that's grounding it.
Yeah, and despite her age, she really, apparently on set, was so amazing to work with. I did an interview with Natalie Dormer when she was in Australia for Picnic and Hanging Rock, and she said that most of her scenes were with Diana Rigg, and she said she was so amazing that all these young cast members, because a lot of people in Game of Thrones also didn't have huge acting backgrounds before they came into the show, so a lot of them were really nervous to suddenly find themselves doing a scene with acting royalty like Diana Rigg, and they said she was such a calming nature on set. She would always offer advice to younger cast members, but they never felt like she was talking down to them or trying to point out what they were doing wrong. She would just try to bring out the best in them. And I think that's another great sign with an actor or an actress of that age, because you hear of so many others who kind of go on to set and demand to be treated like a king or queen, and don't want to work with the younger cast members. So yeah, I think that shows an amazing side to her, and the fact that so many of her Game of Thrones castmates came out this week with heartfelt messages. Peter Dinklage was another one who said that she was one of his favourites to work with on the show. And I think that's the mark of a great actor or a great actress, is when you have people coming out and saying, former castmates coming out and writing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, it's like you said, she'd be a more gracious person. She knows what she can do. She shares the experience with others. Whereas you kind of get these kind of celebrity-centric people come in who aren't necessarily great actors, but they'll act like they're the king of the roost and, talk down to the lower cast or the extras and just not give them the time of day. Whereas you always get a sense that she's not that sort of person.
Yeah.
And for someone of her age, she always maintained this energy, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, and it's such a welcoming thing to hear as well, because I go to a lot of those panels and stuff and hear people talk, and there are so many these days where people are more likely to be honest in those panels these days. So when I'll ask a question about a certain actor or a certain actress, and it didn't go well, they're more than likely to say it on a panel these days. So it's always been a relief to hear people like Alison Hannigan talking about working with somebody like Anthony Head and saying, oh, he was almost like a second father to me on set and stuff like that. Because you hear the opposites. And there's an Australian actor, a well-known Australian actor here in Australia, who is celebrated by his fans, but when you talk to people who have been in shows with him, and none of them have publicly said it yet, but they've said it behind the scenes and have said it at different events and stuff, the guy won't even sit at the same table as young cast members. Like, he has this thing about, nah, I'm better than them, I have my own table kind of thing. And you hear horror stories about this guy where people have gone onto a set and they've gone to ask him for advice and he just stares at them and walks away. It's like, to hear that kind of story compared to, what you hear about Diana Rigg on Game of Thrones, it's just, it's mountains and mountains apart.
Yeah, it's got to come down to, like, an insecurity about your worth or your skills or something. That's the only thing I can factor into it. Yeah,
and personality, I guess. Some people are just, born a-holes, I guess. So, yeah. So moving along for that now, what have we been watching? There's so much coming out at the moment, so what have you been watching?
Yeah, I was kind of getting a bit restless with stuff, and I actually turned back to some of my DVDs. I've been wanting to rewatch the British comedy series Allo Allo, so I've gotten through about 4 seasons of that just recently. I just watched an old Hitchcock movie, Vertigo.
Oh, cool, yeah, that's an awesome movie.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I still kind of felt like something more could have come of it, but I saw what was coming in it. But anyway, just being nitpicky. Oh, yes, we had a conversation the other day, didn't we, about The Babysitter. So I just watched the sequel to it. What is it? The Queen or something? Whatever the second one's called.
Yep.
So memorable now. But yeah, that was actually quite fun. I didn't really expect to think much of what came out of the series, but it was quite good. And a series I just watched on Netflix was called Julie and the Phantoms. So it's kind of a teen show, and this girl Julie is in school, but she's in this kind of music program, and since her mother died, she hasn't been willing to sort of sing and play, and so she kind of gets kicked out of the program. But as soon as she gets kicked out, she finds her inspiration to start playing the piano again and singing and writing music. So she gets, her house is the former house of where this band from the 90s used to play, and they were about to have their big break, and 3 of the 4 members died that night. So their ghosts suddenly reappear as she's having this crisis, and she's the only one that can see them because of their link through music. But, however, when they play, people can start to hear them, and when she performs with them, everyone can see them. So there's this whole story that goes on that they're a hologram band that backs her up. And so it's quite silly, but it's actually quite fun. So it's a pretty short season, like, I don't know, 9 episodes or something. But yeah, I'd like to see where it goes. It's not a bad one. Julie and the Phantoms.
Yeah, okay, I might check that one out as well. Yeah, I've been watching a few interesting things this week. Of course, with our cinemas still closed here, I've been watching a couple of the movies that are being released elsewhere around Australia via Screener. I saw a really good film called Ghosts of War. It's got Billy Zane in it, and also Brenton Thwaites, the Australian actor. A great little film that... I don't know how to say this without spoiling stuff. It's basically about a group of American soldiers who are going into France and trying to drive out the Nazis during World War II. These guys get told to go and stop over at this mansion to make sure that the Nazis haven't returned to it. And when they get there, the guys that they're relieving can't leave there fast enough. And it kind of confuses the guys because they're like, hey, this is a pretty cushy place. Like, it's a a great big mansion. You're out of like the weather. You're away from the actual shooting. Like, why are you guys so eager to leave? And they're like, oh, we just need to get out of here. That night they kind of realize that the place is haunted. So they try to work out like what's going on with the haunting, and plus they know that the Nazis could return. But there's a huge twist in this movie that takes the movie in an entirely different direction, and that's what I don't want to try and spoil. So it is a great little horror. Just stick with it though, because the big twist in this movie is kind of what makes this something a little bit special from some of the other Nazi horror movies that we've been seeing recently. I also watched the film Becky last night, which was a complete surprise to me. I saw the cast list and saw that it was Joel McHale and Kevin James, and was expecting a comedy. What I got was a kind of horror thriller that soon involved people's eyes being cut out and children being murdered. Kevin James plays an escaped prisoner who is a neo-Nazi who's a little bit psychotic, we might say. Joel McHale also doesn't deliver any comedy in this film. He's playing a dad who's trying to mend the relationship with his teenage daughter after his first wife died, and his daughter Becky hasn't recovered from that, and he's now having to tell her the news that he plans on marrying the new woman that he's seeing. So yeah, a real twisted horror thriller. Very, very gory. Kevin James is not funny at all in this film. He is pretty scary, to be honest. But yeah, a great film in that the director and the writer doesn't hold back with this movie. Yeah, kids, as I mentioned, kids get murdered, other kids get beaten up by Kevin James, and it's like, yeah, it really pushes the boundaries for what we are normally used to these days in films, where that kind of thing is really frowned upon. The other thing I started to watch last night was the new season of Body Hack, which I got addicted to the first season. For those that haven't seen it, Todd Sampson used to be an advertising executive in Australia. A few years ago, he decided to try and search for a way to become a better person, both spiritually and mentally. And he does that by going and learning how other people live and what they put their bodies through. So in the new series, he's going to go and study to be a samurai. He's going to study to become a sumo. He looks at voodoo medicine in Africa. Last night's episode was looking at these guys that do these crazy demolition derbies in Utah, where it's just basically whiplash after whiplash. So yeah, that show always intrigues me, and it looks like it's going to be very interesting again this year as well.
Sounds good.
So now, moving on now to our regular segment that we normally do, Bring It Back. And today I want to look at an Australian series called Ship to Shore. A few times on this show we've mentioned about shows like Spellbinder and Ocean Girl, and how we're not really doing those shows anymore in Australia. And one of the shows that I remembered that was well and truly in that children's kind of category and young adult category was a show called Ship to Shore, which was basically about a group of kids who lived on this island called Circe Island, which was actually Garden Island just off Western Australia. And it was all the stuff like these kids talked about wanting to leave the island so that they had more things to do, but at the same time they loved the island and didn't want to leave. So you had people like Julie, played by Jodie Herbert, who was always trying to save the environmental aspects of the island. You had the Crump family. Kelvin, played by Clinton Voss, was like kind of a bit of a rougher kind of kid, but loved the island and didn't really want to ever leave it. And then there was Babe, played by Cleone Morgan Wooten, who was pretty musical and arty, and it was kind of all told from the eyes of Ralph, played by Heath Miller, who was kind of the newcomer to the island. And then you had the Navy security guy, Hermes Endakis, played by Greg Carroll, who was always like trying to bust these kids. He seemed to have this unnatural obsession that the kids were evil, but they weren't. And he was always trying to get them in trouble and trying to get them thrown off the island or put into like detention or whatever. And he was kind of like the lovable idiot. Like they used to get a lot of sight gags off him by having him fall down a hill while he was chasing the kids and stuff like that. And I don't know, it got me thinking about this show. Like, I would love to see it brought back either as the original cast and make it like an older kind of show, like a Pack to the Rafters or something, where these kids all come back to the island. I still get the feeling that Julie would probably still be living on the island. But because the show was kind of done in that age group where you had like teenage crush kind of things, they never really like ended the show with characters getting married or anything like that, of course, but you did have Ralph having a huge crush on Julie, and stuff like that. So you could easily bring it back, the original cast back, and make it like a Pack to the Rafters show, and you could see whether Ralph and Julie ever got together. There was also like the chemistry between Kelvin and Babe. Like, did they ever get together, or did she always just see him as the idiot kind of thing? What did become of Kelvin? Like, most people seem to assume that he was going to end up in juvenile detention at some point in his life kind of thing because of the way he was.
So just the series, you see some of them have paired up and they've got their own kids now, so you kind of follow both generations, and then Kelvin Crump comes back, broken out of jail, and terrorizes the town.
Yeah, with Kevin James. No, there was also like a bit of romantic interest between like Miss Selby, the teacher, and Hermes, which was kind of weird because she didn't like the fact that he hated the kids, but he wanted to fall in love with a teacher. So yeah, there was some weird elements to the show, but yeah, I just think that, especially with the whole thing now about climate change and everything, it would be really awesome for them to bring back this show, because it did touch on so many environmental issues, especially through Julie. So yeah, it could be a really interesting show to bring back. Like, somebody actually joked years ago that this would have been the perfect show to have mashed with the day after tomorrow, because like, if an invasion was going to happen in Australia ever, it would probably bomb Cersei Island, because supposedly it had the biggest navy base in Australia. So like, yeah, you could have mashed the two shows together and stuff like that. But I don't know, is this a show that you would like to see come back?
Well, see, I didn't see a lot of it, but I do remember it. I think I caught it on reruns mostly. But yeah, I remember watching it, some of the episodes at the time, and it was kind of my thing at the time. I used to love the shows kind of Australia, and I guess New Zealand as well, would produce for a young audience. And I think, yeah, with everything you're saying, there's a lot you could pull out of this, and you can take it in further directions. Like, you don't have to completely escape the genre it's in, but yeah, if there's a military base there, that can bring up all sorts of, plot threads. You could go a bit Riverdale with it, even, take what was, those clean-cut Archie comics and turn it into something a bit darker. So I think, yeah, the key is in what characters will return, and what new younger characters will come into it, whether it's their kids or brand new sort of families that are in the area. Yeah, and touch on those issues, like you said. I think there's a lot you could actually do with this.
Yeah, and the majority of the cast never went on to like anything famous. Probably the most famous people out of it, and one is dead. Heath Ledger was in an episode. Ewan Leslie played Guido, the the Italian kid that lived on there, and he's gone on to like some bigger and better things overseas. He's been in like a few Australian movies, including like The Railway Man, with Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell. Not Colin Farrell. Yeah, you know who I mean. Now he's in Sleeping Beauty as well, the Australian film. Like he's probably the one that went on to bigger and better things. But having said that, I think he would probably still come back because it's not like he's gone off and become like a Hollywood A-lister or anything like that. Like a majority of the cast kind of are still acting, but doing like small roles in stuff and things like that. So I think if they...
in season 3, Heath Burgesson was in the cast. Now I know his name. Oh, he's in Rabbit Proof Fence, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, there's so much that you could do with this show, because of like how Australian it was. You could bring in things like Indigenous rights, because I think there was an episode where they found an Aboriginal cave, like the same as what they did with the Henderson kids. They had an episode about that as well. So yeah, I really think it's a show that they could actually look at bringing back. You could kind of imagine like that Julie might have a daughter that's like a little bit Greta Thunberg, just because Julie was kind of that way. And it's kind of weird when you look back at it now, because they had Jodie Herbert play the role, very straight-laced. And back in those days, a lot of people who protested about environmental issues were kind of seen as wackos, or like hippie kind of things. So to have Jodie Herbert play the role of Julie and have it played straight-laced, it's really weird looking back at it now, like how they had her play it, because she was probably one of the first environmental characters on Australian television that was treated as a normal human being. Like even in A Country Practice, Molly was considered a wacko because she wanted to do ethical farming and stuff like that, whereas Julie in Ship to Shore was every teenager on the island's fantasy girl. Like they wanted to be with her, but they used to make these really important she used to bring out these really important stories about dolphins and whales and stuff like that, and which probably educated a whole generation of Australians on that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I think there's a lot of stuff like that you can bring up, and I think that's what would make it kind of good quality programming as well, and ticks a few extra boxes. Like I think some channels would want to pick it up just because it has a slightly educational element, and then a community and a people element. I suppose it's a sufficiently woke for today's audience.
Yeah. It's a shame that Heath Ledger's not still alive, because it would have been awesome to have brought him back, like for kind of a joke, because he wasn't a major character, and he was only in, I think, 1, maybe 2 episodes, and he was only ever referred to as the cyclist. So it would be pretty cool to have him come back and like just have him cycle.
Cyclist in, what was it, Sweat or something like that? One of those.
Yeah. So it would have been kind of interesting if Heath Ledger was still alive, if you just had him come back and like ride through like in the background in a couple of scenes or something like that. So yeah, but like I said, there's so many ways you could bring it back. If they really wanted to make it so that it was more about for a younger audience, you could bring it back and have the characters' kids there, and just have characters like maybe Ralph and Julie did end up together and it's their kids. Maybe Kelvin and Babe had kids. I dread to think what those kids would be like. But like artistic, musical little kids with a criminal streak. So yeah, you could actually do stuff like that. And of course, any of the other characters, that even ones that didn't have partners in the show, you could have their partners in it now as well. So yeah, it could be really interesting, I think, to bring back Ship to Shore.
And as always, remember to contact us if you want to get a show back on the air. We'll do it.
Definitely. And the other segment too last week that we started, where we asked people to actually to write in and tell us a little bit about what shows or what casting they would love to see us do. We got a great one this week from someone called Jill Morgan on Facebook who wanted us to further our discussion from last week about who we would cast as superheroes and asked who would we like to see cast as DC villains. And Harley, I believe you jumped on board and got a whole bunch that you've actually written down about actors you would like to see cast as DC villains.
Yes, so I think we're going to call this the casting couch, aren't we?
We are, even though it's a little bit controversial.
Anyone who'd like to come and sit on our casting couch, please do. Well, I kind of went through first, like, it's funny, whenever something like this comes up, I go completely blank on any actor or actress I've ever seen. I'm like, I can't even think of a name. What? So I had to sort of sit down, and a few names came to my head instantly that I would love to see in something. But then I'm like, what do they get cast as? And, look, the first name I think that came into my head that I would love to see in something was Mia Jovovich. Now, I think possibly the best character for her might be Circe. She's a Wonder Woman villain. She is from Greek mythology. She's a sorceress. And I think she's kind of got that presence and kind of the beauty and stuff like that is just perfect for that character. So that's my number one. I really want Eliza Dushku in there somewhere.
Catwoman.
You and I both, right? Yeah. Well, yeah, Catwoman might be good. Or possibly Poison Ivy. Yeah, maybe Catwoman, actually. I think she'd do a good Catwoman. Some characters, I started making a list of like DC characters because I couldn't even just pop them out of my head. I kind of had to go through and think, what am I not thinking of? One that just occurred to me just before we started the show was Lady Shiva. She's predominantly in the Batman comics, and she was like the ultimate martial artist, assassin. She trains warriors, that sort of thing. And so she's Asian background. I thought, who's a good actress that could play that? I quite like Lana Condor. I don't know if she could do the fighting and such, but she did play Jubilee in the X-Men movies. But there's also, we've just had that new Milan live-action movie come out, and maybe the actress from that, Yifei Liu, might be able to play that part. She's got the skills to do the fighting. I think she's got some decent acting chops from what I've seen, but again, I haven't seen a lot of her, so that might be one. I thought about Mr. Freeze. Now, I thought it might be good to have kind of a Germanic actor, someone like Til Schweiger.
Yep.
I think he's a good one for the part, but
a Freeze is coming.
Yeah. Without those crappy lines, yeah. But I kind of started looking a bit outside the box. I wanted to look for some older actors, but not too old, who could sort of play that part. And I thought I went a bit outside the box and thought, I wonder if someone like Don Cheadle could play that character.
Yeah.
Just like totally out of the box type thing. Here's another one. We both had a bit of a talk about Bane earlier. At first I thought, could you get someone like Antonio Banderas? But I think he's a little old for the part. So maybe Gael Garcia Bernal. It was, if you remember that movie, Ita Mama Tambien.
Yeah.
And he's done quite a few things since. So I think I'd like to see someone like that play the part, because Bane is traditionally like a Hispanic character. So he's got to be someone who's intelligent but can do the action as well. So sometimes it's a bit hard to cast these ones. Well, let's have a look at, say, Superman villains. The big one up there is Brainiac. So this one's going to be hard. Is it going to be a man painted green? Is it going to be a CG kind of character? So, I went down a few angles with this one. So I've got a list of people. If it was going to be more of a CG character, then it didn't really matter who was physically in the role. It was more going to be a case of who could portray the part. And I went for people with voices and a certain kind of presence.
Yeah.
So if you remember the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, his voice would just be so good in that part, I reckon. Or if you remember John Rhys Davies, old actor, but he was in Sliders as Professor Arturo. He's lost a lot of weight these days, so he probably be a bit more fit for the part. But again, probably would be more for a CG version of the character. But then thinking Doctor Who, I thought, okay, if we had someone standing in the role, maybe someone like Matt Smith.
Yep.
I think he'd have a nice presence on there, or Anthony Stewart Head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Failing that, maybe Joseph Gordon-Levitt, because he's got a certain way of, performance that he might be able to sell it. I think it's got to be someone who comes across as really intelligent and calculating. It's an interesting, really kind of inhuman role to play. So some of them are a bit, tricky.
Yeah.
What about, there's Dr. Psycho. For anyone who's watched the Harley Quinn animated series, you probably know the character of Dr. Psycho. He's a very small man with basically telekinetic and telepathic powers. So Peter Dinklage kind of seems like the obvious choice for that.
Yeah.
I can totally see him doing it. Back to actually Superman villains again. There was a character of Mr. Mxyzptlk. Now he's like this interdimensional kind of fairy magical character, and he's sort of been conjured up for a different series on TV. Like they did a version of him in Lois and Clark and a version in Smallville, but he was always played by kind of like handsome, charismatic kind of characters. Actually, they've had him on Supergirl as well, where I think he was kind of handsome and charismatic the first time around, and then when he came back, he's like, "No, this is my real face," and he wasn't that at all. But in the comics, he's kind of this small, old-looking guy with grey hair and kind of a silly costume, and I wanted to go back to that a bit, like be a bit more like the comics. And two people came to my mind. One, maybe not so small, but kind of that older character with real personality who could sell it, Bill Murray.
Yeah.
I wanted someone with a bit of a comic leaning. The other choice, and this person is smaller, Leslie Jordan, who you might know from, say, Will and Grace. He played the character of Beverly Leslie.
Yep.
He was like the kind of arch nemesis of Karen Walker. So, I don't know, someone really kind of quirky should play that part, I reckon.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got pages of this crap. What are some of yours?
I went for some more of the obscure kind of characters, but people that I could see playing them. My first one was the character of Lady Shiva from Superman and Batman worlds, and I actually thought Dishman Lockman from Dollhouse and the 100 would be an absolutely perfect pick for that. Another one I thought of was Mad Hatter, and I actually thought Marilyn Manson would make a really, really good Mad Hatter.
That's a really different take. I quite like that, yeah.
Marilyn Manson's done like some acting roles over the years, and I actually thought that he would actually kind of bring a really kind of interesting feel to that character as well, like maybe a bit of even more of an eviler vibe than what you would normally expect for that role. I also thought of Kyle Chandler for Two-Face, a little bit of an older Two-Face, but I think Kyle Chandler...
I picked some older Two-Faces as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking either kind of like really left of field Leonardo DiCaprio, just for something unexpected.
Yeah, I had Leo
like
down.
He did it.
I had Leo down as well for the Riddler.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
So.
And I also thought maybe even possibly Don Cheadle could have done Two-Face.
Yep. Yeah. My another one that I had here as well was, and I don't know how this would go age-wise, but I was wondering about Angelina Jolie playing Rose Wilson.
Ah, that's an interesting thought. I knew
So,
there was someone I was forgetting, and she popped into my head at one stage, and then I forgot about it. That's exactly who I was thinking of, Angelina Jolie.
yeah.
I can't remember who I was thinking of.
So I had watching Becky last night gave me some ideas as well. I thought Kevin James, now that we've seen that he could play a really good psycho, and I actually had two roles that I thought that he could play as a villain. One, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I thought Professor Pig might be a good one for Kevin James if he can really go into that like kind of psychotic side, and because of his body,
I can see that.
because of his body image, body weight as well. But I also thought that perhaps Kevin James, if you could get him to like muscle up a little bit, perhaps he could actually play like a kind of bigger but a little bit buffer version of Bane as well.
Yeah.
So, look, I had some interesting ones here as well. I thought perhaps Johnny Depp as Toyman, depending on, of course, what happens with Johnny Depp now that...
I was looking at Johnny Depp and I thought, who would he play? Yeah, Toyman, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, some kind of ones that I guess are kind of obvious, but like Robert De Niro playing Carmine Falcone.
Yeah.
Yeah, like some of them are really kind of obvious, but yeah.
I found a really obscure character called Silhouette, who was from like really old Green Lantern comics.
Yeah.
And he was just basically, I guess his call to fame was kind of announcing that he's going to do these crimes, kind of just to prove that he could do this sort of thing, get away with it. And that was the main inspiration for him doing these crimes, just to say, I bet I could do it and get away with it. But then he kind of got greedy, and that's what ended up making him get caught. But I think his claim to fame is that he's got no powers, he's a regular guy, but he managed to punch out Green Lantern.
Yeah.
So I kind of like a quirky character who kind of starts with nothing. And it's going to be like the personality of this character is going to sell it. I thought maybe someone like David Hasselhoff. Yeah,
I like that. Some more of my obscure ones. Betty White playing Granny Goodness.
Yes, that's funny. I thought of Granny Goodness this morning, and I thought, I should have thought about casting her. Betty White's perfect.
Miles Teller playing Clock King.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a majority of my main ones that I really thought about. So
there's a couple of other ones I might as well mention while we're here. I thought about there's this character Puppeteer or Puppet Master. It's basically from Teen Titans comics. I thought Dane DeHaan might be a good one for that.
Yeah,
so he's got like these kind of like a hypnosis power. I don't know if it's his power or if it's in his mask or something, but he can basically turn people into his puppets. And apparently he also has exploding marionettes. So I thought, that's a quirky little character. And Dane DeHaan, I reckon, could play that. I love the character of Scarface and the ventriloquist from Batman. So Scarface is a little kind of gangster puppet, and he's carried around by this ventriloquist character who's like this bumbling kind of nobody. So I was kind of thinking, because you're really going to focus on the ventriloquist being this bumbling character, but Scarface is the real evil dark heart, and you're never quite sure if Scarface is actually alive or is just being controlled by this ventriloquist thing. So you kind of need someone who can kind of split that range a little bit. So this is where I went for kind of older actors again as well. And going back to my kind of British leanings, and I went back to the Doctor Who actors, I thought Colin Baker, who played the Sixth Doctor, has a really interesting presence. He could do that kind of bumbling ventriloquist, but bring out a more deep and dark Scarface character. And I thought maybe John Rhys-Davies again. He's another one I thought, looking at older actors. Christopher Eccleston, who also played the Ninth Doctor.
Yes. And the best Doctor, I should say.
I think it would be a fun thing for him to have a bit of a play with. He can play with those different sides he likes. And maybe going really outside the box, someone like Bill Nye.
Yeah. I guess too, like one of the ones I had which is kind of difficult to say because she's already played a character in the DC world. But for some reason, I really thought that Ruby Rose could make a really, really interesting Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
So, but I also thought...
I had a few names for Poison Ivy, actually.
I had Zendaya down for Poison Ivy as well.
Yeah, that would be a good one. I had a few real different ones. So, I had Eliza Dushku, Rooney Mara, Jamila Jamil from The Good Place.
Yep.
There's something quite different. I think she's got a kind of a presence that might work. And Sofia Vergara.
Yeah.
Just to be totally out there. There's a character in the Batman comics actually called Anarchy. And I always kind of like this one. He's originally kind of a younger guy in this red outfit and gold mask with the Anarchy symbol painted on him. And then I was trying to think of kind of younger actors and stuff that might be good for it. It was a bit hard. Like, I know there's actors and shows I like, and I just couldn't recall anything. I do kind of like, if we were going to go slightly older and not like teenage, 20-year-old young, maybe Dylan O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I kind of put down a couple of other names, but I'm not super familiar with their work, so I wasn't sure. But there's a Ki Hong Lee and Paul Iacono. And I don't know, they kind of seem like, well, Ki Hong Lee was in, what was it? He was in Maze Runner with Dylan O'Brien, that's right. You'll know the character,
Yeah.
He was in most of the movies, I think. And I thought, yeah, that might be an interesting one. He kind of has that look about him. He can do the physical stuff, being in those movies. And, yeah, I don't know, I kind of wanted to look outside the box a bit.
Yeah. I had another one down here as well for the Riddler. I thought Johnny Galecki could kind of make an interesting Riddler. Another one that I thought, I'm kind of 50-50 on this because I don't know if it'd be too cliched or not, but I was wondering about Vin Diesel playing Bane. I don't know, it just, after like what he did with Bloodshot, a lot of the times during Bloodshot, I kept on almost thinking of Bane as a character, so...
He might be able to, actually, because he doesn't... I mean, he used to just play kind of the action hero kind of standard character, but I think since then he's done a bit more, interesting, like, character parts. So maybe, because I think he could pull off the intelligent kind of gang leader side of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's so many out there. Like, I could have kept on going and going and going with my list, I think. There was so many...
Oh, yeah, my list isn't even finished, and I'm not even going to try. Although, one out-of-the-box one, I will say, I thought about if they brought Egghead out of the old Batman TV show and put him into the movies, Bryan Cranston.
I like that, yeah. Yeah, that would really, really work. So, you know what was really funny? I spent so much time trying to think of people that could play characters like the Penguin and stuff like that, but it was all the more obscure kind of characters that ended up coming through. Like, the only ones I really thought of for the main ones was I thought like maybe like a Miles Teller or a Leonardo DiCaprio could even play the Joker and do it quite well. I thought Viggo Mortensen to play Mr. Freeze.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, but it was all the more obscure kind of characters that I was like going through and finding people that I thought would be absolutely perfect to play those parts. So, yeah.
Actually, one I didn't mention, and it's kind of a big Green Lantern villain / love interest, is the character of Star Sapphire. Now, kind of the main one I think people think of is, I think there's been a couple of versions of Star Sapphire. So the main one was Carol Ferris, who in the comics is kind of his love interest. So if you remember the the movie that came out a few years ago, Carol Ferris was played by Ryan Reynolds' own wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blake Lively. And I'm like, you know what? I would love Blake Lively in the part again. I think Blake's great. I would cast her in half of these roles we mentioned.
Yeah.
Maybe. Failing that, again, I thought, let's go left of field again. Really out there, and everyone's going to think, why the hell did you mention that person? Aubrey Plaza.
Yeah.
Just totally off the bench kind of thing. She's got such a way about her, and she's beautiful. I think she could play that kind of, the crazy kind of, jealous, in love kind of Star Sapphire that would go mental over Hal Jordan or whatever. I think, that would be an interesting one.
Another one I just thought of too, I was thinking of other actors out there that I really like at the moment. I'm always kind of intrigued to see what they do. I wonder how Jesse Plemons would go playing something like the Riddler.
Jesse Plemons, what was he in?
So, he played Landry in Friday Night Lights. He was also in Breaking Bad. But he also has done like kind of a few kooky kind of comedy roles as well over the years. But he also just did, he was a serious character in The Irishman, which we hadn't seen him play serious for a while.
Yeah.
So I kind of wondered, because he's kind of got this, he's a redhead, and he's kind of got this ability to be able to be funny, but to also be kind of like threatening and deadly serious when he needs to as well.
Well, that actually sounds like a good Mad Hatter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a few people out there that I think would be absolutely perfect. And yeah, keep writing in and saying, telling us stuff, because we've got some amazing ones here that we're hoping to be able to tackle over the next few weeks. We've had questions about casting the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. We've had people asking who should be the new Green Lantern, and stuff like that. So keep those questions coming in, and we might be, we'll be able to talk about it on air. And also, we're going to go into the prize cabinet as well. And for Jill out there, we're going to give you a copy of the brand new Ryder Mitchell Lynn Shay movie Dreamcatcher on DVD, for sending that through. So thank you.
Well done.
Thank you so much for sending that through. I guess that's it for this episode of Subculture. I've been Dave G, and my co-host has been...
I'm the attacking killer tomato.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Subculture.
Adios.